Lightning split the sky on a night filled with heavy rain. Inside a small hut at the edge of the village, Adaku knelt on the cold, packed dirt. Her tears fell freely as she prayed. Outside, the wind howled and the walls rattled, but her voice did not tremble. She prayed for her husband, Obi, whose absence felt like a deep wound. Adaku's heart pounded with worry. No letters, no word of his safety. Yet she kept praying. Even in the darkest hour, she refused to let fear overcome her faith. Adaku had once lived a life of hope and laughter. Born in a peaceful village, known for its flowing streams and green hills, she learned kindness from her parents and faith from the elders who gathered each morning to pray. When she married Obi, it felt like a blessing. He was tall, strong, and quick to smile. They built their home with love in every corner. Folks called them the joyful couple. They rose early each day, hands locked in prayer, thankful for the health and strength to work. Adaku sold homemade goods at the market, while Obi labored in a factory in a neighboring town. They talked about children, about building a better life, and about ways to help others in need. Love seemed to follow them. It was, to all who saw it, a match made with the blessings of heaven. Then one year, a sudden closure of Obi's factory changed everything. In the beginning, he tried to remain calm. He traveled far and wide, looking for another job. Day after day, rejection met him at every door. It wore him down. The man who had once walked with confident strides now shuffled with slumped shoulders. Bills piled up. Food became scarce. Adaku would greet her husband at the door each evening, offering a gentle smile and a warm meal from what little they had. But Obi was too ashamed to meet her eyes. He felt useless. The men in the village whispered among themselves, calling him a man without direction. The women pitied Adaku for her husband's loss. Their words reached Obi's ears, and he grew bitter, certain that he had failed not only himself, but his loving wife as well. At first, Adaku gently nudged him to keep faith. She suggested they pray together as they once did. But Obi's sadness had hardened into anger. He was convinced that God had turned away from him. Rather than kneel beside Adaku, he stayed in bed or wandered the streets alone. As the weeks went by, Obi avoided home. He spent his evenings under the old Iroko tree with friends who blamed everything on the world around them. They would tell stories of how easy life could be if they left the village for the big city. Temptation circled them like a hawk waiting to strike. And one day, after another fruitless job search, Obi packed his few belongings, turned his back on his home, and left without a proper goodbye. Adaku woke that morning to an empty space on the mat. At first, she thought Obi had gone out to look for work. But when he did not return by dusk, a cold dread spread in her chest. She found a note, short and vague, saying he was heading to the city for better opportunities. No promises, no hint of when he might return. It cut her deeply, yet she refused to lose hope. From that night on, Adaku made a choice. She would pray for Obi every day until he came home. She did not curse his name or fill her days with anger. Instead, she knelt on the same mat each dawn and dusk and asked God to watch over him. Some neighbors mocked her devotion. They shook their heads when she spoke his name. They told her she was naive to wait for a man who had left so easily. He won't come back, they said. He is lost to the temptations of the city. But Adaku remembered the man she fell in love with. She remembered his warm smile, his booming laugh, and the way he cared for their small home. She believed that the goodness in Obi still lived within him. She believed that her prayers had the power to bring him back. The city greeted Obi with both promise and false glitter. At first, things seemed to improve. He found temporary work at a construction site. The pay was enough to cover a bare-bones room and simple meals. He allowed himself a spark of hope, thinking he had made the right move. But soon, life turned. The site shut down after some legal trouble, leaving Obi out of work again. As before, he tried to keep searching, yet the city was large and unforgiving. He felt invisible in the crowds. Each rejection stung like a fresh wound. To forget his failures, he turned to strangers who offered quick thrills. Night after night, he joined people in cramped bars or street corners. The drinks numbed him for a while, and the loud music drowned out his guilt. But the emptiness always returned with the sunrise. Money ran through his fingers like water. The so-called friends who cheered his arrival now avoided his call. They had no use for a man with no money and no luck. Soon, he was forced to sleep in filthy corners of abandoned buildings or on sagging old benches. In the midst of that misery, something surprising happened. One night, he dreamed of Adaku. She knelt on their old mat, head bowed, hands clasped. In the dream, her voice was steady as she prayed. He felt her hope and her love like a gentle glow in the darkness. It made him realize he still had a home and a wife who cared deeply for him. When he woke, his heart thundered with regret and longing. He had left behind the one who had never stopped believing in him. The next day, Obi decided to return to the village. He had no money for a proper ride, so he walked. It took him several days, traveling along dusty roads under the hot sun. At night, he rested in small inns when he could afford it, or under the open sky when he couldn't. He carried nothing but a small bundle of clothes and the weight of shame. With each step, he wondered if Adaku had given up on him. He pictured her turning him away, shutting the door in his face. It frightened him, but something kept him moving forward. It was the memory of her faith, a faith that had once been his as well. By the time he reached the familiar dirt paths of the village, dusk was settling in. The last rays of light revealed the silhouette of his old home. It looked the same, though a bit more worn. The house was silent. He stood there, uncertain if he could even knock. Finally, he raised a trembling hand and tapped on the door. It opened at once, as if someone had been expecting him. Adaku stood there, holding an oil lamp. Shadows flickered across her face, but her eyes were filled with relief. She looked at Obi, thin and tired from his long journey, and recognized the husband she had prayed for night after night. She did not scold him. She did not ask him where he had been. She simply stepped aside and let him in. Obi followed her inside, his voice caught in his throat. The house felt both familiar and distant. Memories clashed with guilt. Adaku led him to a small wooden stool and offered him water. He drank it slowly. Overcome by emotions, he could barely speak. Then in the quiet, she lit another lamp and sat across from him. Obi looked at her, tears gathering in his eyes. I have no excuse, but, he thought. I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But as he shifted his gaze, he saw Adaku's eyes, filled not with anger, but with understanding. He bowed his head. In a shaky voice, he murmured, I was lost. I am so sorry. Adaku placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. She said no harsh words. Instead, with a softness that echoed in the still air, she reached for her old prayer mat. She set it on the ground and motioned for Obi to kneel beside her. For a moment, he hesitated, uncertain, ashamed. Yet the silent invitation of her faith pulled him in. He knelt down. They both closed their eyes, hearts beating in quiet unison. After all the months of fear and doubt, they prayed together again. When they finished, Obi felt a warm peace wash over him. It didn't fix every problem at once, but it reminded him of the man he used to be, and the man he could still become. Word spread quickly through the village that Obi had returned. Some were still skeptical. They thought he might wander off again. Others felt a spark of hope. Everyone watched closely, curious to see what would happen. In the days that followed, Obi worked hard to rebuild his life. He helped around the house, repaired their leaky roof, and accompanied Adaku to the market carrying her goods. At night, he knelt beside her, grateful for one more chance. There were setbacks. Work was not easy to find, and money remained tight. But neither he nor Adaku lost faith. They were together again, bound by a love that had survived a storm. Adaku's prayers continued, but now Obi prayed with her. They woke each morning before the sun rose, bowing their heads, asking for guidance and courage. They trusted that blessings would come in time. Slowly, doors began to open. A small workshop needed extra hands, and Obi found a job there. It paid modestly, but it was enough to keep food on the table and light in their home. Adaku sold her goods more widely than before, telling people how her prayers had brought her husband back. The villagers listened with curiosity, some with awe. A few sneered. They claimed it was luck, not prayer, that had turned things around. But Adaku knew the truth. She had seen the power of faith. She felt it every time she saw Obi smile again. As the seasons passed, life found its balance. Obi grew stronger at his job, proving himself reliable. Adaku's warmth and perseverance brought her more customers at the market. Together, they saved a little money and repaired their small home. They never forgot the lessons learned. Hardship could strike at any moment. Faith could be tested until one felt hopeless. Temptation could lure a person away from what truly mattered. But so long as they stayed close to each other and to God, they believed no storm could shatter their bond. One evening, when the sky was clear and stars shone like lanterns, Obi stepped outside after dinner. He gazed at the dark outline of the hills around the village. He thought about the wild path he had walked, the promises of the city, the bitter nights, the dream that had stirred his soul. Then he turned to look at Adaku through the open door. She was lighting the oil lamp for their nightly prayer, that same quiet smile on her face. In that moment, Obi understood that her faith had been his guiding light in the darkness. She had never stopped praying, never stopped hoping. Through her, he had learned that love mixed with faith could pull a person from the deepest pit. He entered the house and joined her on the mat. They knelt and prayed, but this time there was no sadness in Obi's heart, only gratitude and resolve. Adaku had welcomed him home with open arms, and now he vowed never to lose his way again. Moral reflections. A marriage rooted in faith is strong enough to weather the hardest storms. A wife's unwavering prayer can guide a lost husband back home. No distance is too far, no mistake too great to prevent a return to love. When love stands hand in hand with faith, it becomes a shield against despair. In the end, The Praying Wife and the Lost Husband is a story that reminds us that true devotion demands patience. Adaku's story shows that real love does not blame or punish. It hopes, waits, and prays, believing that every lost soul can find the way back home. And sometimes all it takes is one steadfast heart to show the way. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more exciting stories from the heart of Africa.